Hey everybody, I'm Andy Ostroy. Welcome into the back room. We have presidential historian Alexis Coe with us today. We shall get to Alexis in just a second, but first, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and or post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please follow or subscribe and rate and review, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. Alexis Coe. She's a presidential historian and a fellow at New America, where she is thinking about the presidency in anticipation of America's 250th. She is the award-winning New York Times bestselling author of You Never Forget Your First, a biography of George Washington, and Alice+Freda Forever, a murder in Memphis. She frequently appears on CNN, MSNBC, CBS, the History Channel, BBC, and PBS, and has been featured in and published by most major publications, including The New Yorker, The New York Times, and The Washington Post. She is a frequent guest on NPR and hosted the podcasts No Man's Land and Presidents Are People Too. Alexis, welcome back into the back room.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so we got to talk about the news, the debate. Give me your biggest takeaways.
There were two people on that stage. We're talking about one. I have known that there are single issue voters on things like taxes and gun reform and a lot of issues. I didn't know a 3-year age difference was a bigger issue than democracy. Mm-hmm. But here we are. I mean, it was disappointing. But here's the thing. There have been disappointing presidential debates since we've been having presidential debates. I'm for, by the way, as an aside, getting rid of this entire thing. Mm-hmm. It's exhausting. It goes on too long. This thing being a presidential election that's like 17 years long. We could just get rid of it. It's the first 100 years of our history, everyone would think this was untoward. But I think what was shocking to me is that everyone has the memory of a goldfish. Like, we have had bad debates in recent history. Do you remember Obama and Romney? Mm-hmm. Who were like, oh, no, Sleepy Joe, it was Sleepy Obama. Right. Those were the headlines. And so that was really frustrating to me. But people also obviously, Trump did what Trump does best. He derailed the conversation and memory.
Mm-hmm. What do you make of the decision that was made clearly by CNN brass together with Jake Tapper and Dana Bash to not fact check? I mean, they're both very smart, capable, tough, hard-hitting journalists. So this was obviously a calculated decision not to interfere in that way. And I just think that was a huge mistake, because if you have two people on stage, like you say, and one of them is completely untethered to facts and truth and reality, that person's going to win just on that alone because there's no one there to fact check them. And so in this case, Trump, who's a pathological liar, gets to say whatever he wants. And 50 million people were watching, and moderators didn't moderate.
Moderators were not moderating. I agree. And this is also as old as presidential debates, right? You never think the moderator does a good job. Everyone is either like, well, they did the best they could, right, or they were terrible. Mm-hmm. But I will say I have seen better performances from those two. And I knew that it wasn't going to be fact-checked, which was maddening because Daniel Dale, of course, their lead fact-checker, is excellent. He texts me all the time and asks me questions. Mm-hmm. And he's quick and he's thorough, and it's something that's very difficult for someone like me who, deals in details and citations. He is succinct. Mm-hmm. And so I really do feel like he could have delivered. And we know who he is. We know who Trump is. We know what he does. Mm-hmm. So it was a huge, I won't say it was a miscalculation because they knew what they were doing. And I think we have to recognize here that this is the media, and that the media needs ratings. And that also has to do with the commentary in the aftermath. But I think there's another really important point here, which is that a debate is supposed to be a debate of ideas. And it's supposed to tell voters what they can expect in the future. And that is not what happened. We had a rehashing of old fights. We had a really weird pseudo-masculine macho golf situation, mm-hmm. Which I'm sure most of the country can relate to. And so I think what was shocking to me is that the moderators also let him get away with this constantly. That you had one candidate, Biden, who is slowly but mostly truthfully, talking about issues, using facts, too many. This happens to me again, so I empathize with this, is challenged with a stutter already. You have all these things going on. And then you have another person who's just going off the rails, saying whatever. It's the Gish method where you just like say all these things. But here's what we know from every authoritarian study, of which there are many. And it's textbook. It's like a narcissist, like any sort of disorder. Like you can look, there's no original takes here. And what we know is you have to come in right away and correct the lie. And what happened instead was, how many times did he repeat that people were killing babies after they were born? I think it was like 3 or 4 times. That's out there. No correction. They could have come in there. Jake and Dana could have come in there and said something, and they didn't. And I hope that they sit with that.
Yeah, I see it as a big problem. I don't understand the point of having this event. I won't call it a debate because it wasn't a debate, but this kind of an event, if all you're doing knowingly is giving a pathological liar the platform to lie nonstop. Does this particular debate taint the whole process and even the institution of the presidency itself in terms of this is what the presidency has become? Is that what we have to look forward to going forward? To your point, should we just not have these anymore?
I have 2 answers. One, what's really interesting is we're talking about how Biden got better as he warmed up. He had a slow start. We're not talking about how Trump at first seemed very prepared. I was a little bit nervous, but oh my God, he actually for once put in the work and then became completely incoherent and rambling and fading as time went on. Nobody's talking about that. So that's one thing. The second thing is, do I think that this informed voters? Do I think that this was particularly meaningful? No, I think certainly the framing of it has done the entire system a disservice. I didn't see the editorial board at the New York Times, who I'm like currently writing an op-ed for. So, I mean, I love them, but this is the whole point of an op-ed section is you have a lot of debate. But I did not see them come out and say, hey, Trump is unfit to be president because he has 30, he's a convicted felon.
Well, no one seems to be saying that. That's the crazy double standard. Who's calling for him to drop out of the race?
Here's the thing that we do have here, right? Despite this ridiculous debate, we're trying to figure out who's going to be president. We know how they president. We've seen it. Biden has done quite well, and Trump has not. And so if there's anything worthwhile from this entire thing, it's that should be the conversation. It's not the conversation. I'm going to try to drive it that way, but I'm only one tiny woman in a small village.
Well, it's interesting because you're right. And that's what Kamala Harris said after the debate. She kind of got a little testy. She said, I'm not going to stand here and rip apart Joe Biden for 90 minutes when I've worked with him for 3.5 years and I've seen what he's actually done. And the rest of the country also has seen what he's done. Republicans, it doesn't matter what Donald Trump does. Joe Biden, the nanosecond something doesn't go right, just look what's happening from the New York Times to other people in the Democratic establishment. The panic is rabid. And the thing that scares me the most is that I don't think people are realizing that you cannot talk about how important swing voters are, how critical they are to this campaign, to Joe Biden's victory in November, without thinking, what are you saying to those people when you call for Biden to quit? If you're saying to them, I don't like this guy, he's not fit, and I'm abandoning him, why the hell should you vote for him if you're a swing voter in Michigan, right?
Well,
that's crazy.
Andy, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit.
Okay.
Because I still believe that we have this democracy in which a healthy political party is not, we're royalists, but we've never been loyalists. That's been true since the revolution, meaning that we do tend to enjoy a show. We love some entertainment, but we don't necessarily genuflect in the direction of a monarch. And that's what the Republicans are doing. But the Republicans are having a crisis. They have nothing. Their legislation is, I want to have like a Biden-esque, like the morals of an alley cat, but I don't really have anything. But it's so thin, you can see through it. And the Democrats, the thing that has always defined the Democrats is that they haven't been able to get on the same point, the same messaging, the way Republicans have. And I think that is healthy. It at times is not useful. But we can't be saying, don't look there, because then it's hypocritical to say, let's not talk about that. Let's not look there. It seems dishonest, and I don't think that it will help the general electorate recover from their cynicism towards the office. I think that there is use in being self-critical, and I think of my own patriotism, which is very strong, no matter what half the emails say, as self-critical. And that is the patriotism of Frederick Douglass. We're recording this right before July 4th, right? Every July 4th in our country's history, and actually I swear to God, if Biden doesn't take advantage of this moment, I will. They take that moment, they seize upon it to talk about how we are an evolving situation. And Frederick Douglass in particular would change his speech just a couple words every year. Elizabeth Cady Stanton came out and asked for the women's right to vote on July 4th. Every single time where we've been at this precipice, where there has been the need for a huge change somehow, whether it be socially, politically, whatever it is, this has been a significant moment. And I think that we are at this moment where it's okay to be critical and okay to point out what's going on. But I don't think we should say we can't be having this conversation. I do think there's a lot of magical thinking. And I've been, people confide in me this magical thinking. I think I've told you about this before, that people tell me about their fantasies about the presidency. So for a long time, women would whisper to me that they hoped that Biden would step down so that Kamala would be the first woman president. And I don't indulge in that, but I have been for quite some time. And I have been looking I was supposed to go to the RNC, and I'm not actually, after all, which would have been quite a to-do, because is he even able to go there? Is the candidate even able to show up? Unplug the stage a coup. That has been my thought process this entire time. But I do think it's worth having a really open conversation for both parties about what's going on. I think my magical thinking here is that they dump both candidates, but that's very hard to do under our system. The candidates themselves have to kind of have a moment. We don't have a precedent for this.
I agree with you about 90% or more of what you just said. Where I'll differ is that, to me, there's a difference between being self-critical, between having an important, authentic conversation, and demanding someone quit the race 4 months before the election. And what I'm saying is, I'd like to see those first two things happening. We should have a conversation. The party establishment talking to the campaign, talking to Biden himself. Sir, do you really know what's ahead for the next? Are you really able to Biden came out yesterday. He is self-critical. I mean, come on, you can't get more self-critical than I'm old. I don't walk, talk, eat, move, think as fast as I used to.
And he did quite well when he's done quite well, of course, every moment since the debate.
Yes.
He's been on fire.
But my problem is with get rid of him.
Yeah.
And that it just seems like there were maybe, to your point and your fantasies, there were those people with the fantasies on the sidelines for however long, and boom, this moment comes along on a silver platter. And it's like, see, boom, get rid of them.
But you know what they never say after that? Who?
Yes, well,
who's going to be there?
You're raising a really interesting point, because I said the other day, stop the Gavin Newsom and Josh Shapiro fantasies for a second, okay? Because what that entails is leapfrogging over the black lady. Now, if you think the Democratic Party and Joe Biden have a problem with the coalition now, with young voters and voters of color, try telling Kamala Harris, we know you're next in line, but we want a white guy. See how that works out for you. So a lot of this isn't even practical unless it's Kamala Harris, which to me would be fine. I would love to see Kamala Harris president. But I don't think anybody's thinking these things through about the practicality of this from a timing perspective. how would this even work? Joe Biden says, I'm sticking around. He's not going anywhere. So unless he says, I'm out of here, how does the party go into the convention and dump Biden?
It doesn't really, unless he says something. I mean, there's I don't know how it works. I think let's say it did. Let's just indulge in the one thing we know could happen. I'm not a constitutional scholar, so perhaps there are loopholes, but I haven't seen any, and I know plenty of them, and I've been texting them, and they don't see any. But let's just say this happens. The problem is you are facing off against the, for better or worse, most famous man in the world. The name recognition. You can't, like, there are people in this country who actually do not know Kamala Harris's name.
Right.
There are plenty who do, but it would be very, like, Gavin Newsom will hit every single point. That man is a quick thinker. He is, I'm from California. He doesn't really do it for me, but
He's got great hair, though.
Look,
that matters.
He's a good-looking man. He's smart. He's rich. He's got a nice family. The wife, the like many children, all the things we love and could use. But he doesn't compel people in the way, and that's a bigger question, because there are so many 18th, 19th, 20th century presidents who would not do well, and would in elections because we wouldn't find them particularly compelling. So, like, what do you want? Do you want a president or do you want an entertainer? But so we have that problem. Kamala Harris, and I've been saying this a lot, so forgive me if I've actually already said this, but I'm a fellow at New America, and when I go to DC for that, or to give a talk, or, presidential historian, there's a lot there for me. When I go there, what I constantly hear that I'm so surprised about is what a great job she's doing. What a phenomenal job she's doing. How she just got back from this conference and she was incredible and she did that. And she's got all these offices that we don't talk about, which should be consequential to younger voters, which, the bad part about COVID, it killed a lot of the older generation. The good part about this election, there are a lot of younger people have other concerns, but what they should be concerned about, and that's been a part of this fellowship project this year, How Should a President Be? I've gone on this 13-stop, nationwide tour, and one of the conversations was about youth. And I polled people, in a small sample size, but still enough, from Virginia, New York, and then nationwide, and based mostly in Florida. And I asked them if they understood about the new offices, about the Office of Gun Violence and Prevention. They had never heard of it. Their responses, there were like more than 10 responses were noise, which I thought were pretty funny, but they've never heard of it. And that's a really key issue to them. And vice presidents, that's a whole different conversation, or maybe it's this conversation. They are not given a lot of runway. They're supposed to be a really supportive second, which Pence, for a long time until he did frighteningly well. Biden did it with feeling. And Kamala Harris has, that's not been their relationship. She's been off, though doing important work. What you see, however, again, in the media is you see a lot of things about the way she dresses, that she's not really like you expect a great prosecutor because we all want like the good wife. And that's not her. That she has sort of a word salad going on that's not that different. I saw today a big thing going around Twitter was just she reuses one phrase a lot, and they had like 4 minutes of it, but you could have 4 minutes of Trump saying all sorts of crazy things over and over again, like about killing babies after they're born. Yeah, it would be just a ton of time. So this is a problem that I don't know if you can combat in 4 months, because it's not a good story to the media. And that's a bigger failure of the campaign. So I guess I'm sort of getting lost here, but there's a lot. It's a scary moment. I think the debate should be much earlier. I do have to say that if there is another one, I'm not sure there will be, and it should have been earlier. There should have been fact checking, and it should have been much earlier anyway. Because he's also presidenting. Like, he's being president. It's an exhausting job. Whereas Trump is just, he's showing up in courtrooms, but he's pretty much just going to rallies, which invigorates him.
Mm-hmm. So when you say debate should be earlier, do you mean the next one scheduled for September should be earlier, or
it should be like a nooner.
Oh, earlier in the day.
It should be like before the farmers market opens.
So like this. So in theory, kind of like when senior citizens eat, just like have dinner at 4:00. You're saying have the debate at noon, so that
I would say arguably for both of them.
Get tired.
Yeah, I would say arguably for both of them, and I do mean both of them. It was like primetime elder abuse.
So, all right. So speaking of both of them, let's talk about Trump for a second. Okay, so we established that he's a maniac and no one's asking him to quit. But you had mentioned something to me a couple of weeks ago about the Republican convention. Maybe within Republican circles the last couple of days, maybe things have improved. They're feeling a little bit better about Trump, given Biden's performance in the debate, whatever. But he's still a maniac. He's still got 2 impeachments, 4 indictments, convicted on 34 felony accounts, got multiple trials, legal situations ahead of him. He's going to be sentenced. He's got another debate, which could go really wrong. He's going to pick a vice president. Who the hell knows who that's going to be? It could be someone crazy like Vivek Ramaswamy. Oh. You had a scenario where if Republicans go into Milwaukee fearing Donald Trump, and they are fantasizing about Nikki Haley, who's still pulling 20% or so of the votes. Play that out for us. If this was Hollywood, what would that scenario look like in Milwaukee?
Right. If this was like the movie The American President, and we had like a Douglas equivalent. Mm-hmm. Oh yes, I did. I unfolded this. I remember on the walkway, I ended up with like 1,000 bites. Mm-hmm. So here's my fantasy. But I don't know if anyone's really fantasizing about Nikki Haley, but she's a person who's like they could bully her and it would be great. They get to the RNC, and now I'm not going to be there, so I can't whisper in everyone's ear. But you get to the RNC, and he's not there because he's a convicted felon, so he's not allowed to cross state lines. Mm-hmm. And basically, they unplug the Zoom, and what we know is there's a short period of time in which this convention happens, right? It starts on a Monday, it ends on a Thursday night. Mm-hmm. Thursday night is when things start to happen as far as, there's a big acceptance speech, all the balloons come down, and that's it. They're terrified of Trump. They're terrified of crossing him. Now he's installed Lara Trump, which again, I want to point out that Biden has not installed any family members anywhere. And so you have that. You have just her running around, but it's her first time at this rodeo. She doesn't know what she's doing. And you have a lot of Trump surrogates there, but you also have everyone who he has disrespected, them, their family, bullied, and made their lives considerably worse. There's some comments usually in oral histories about the Kennedy family and how they ruin lives. And I just can't wait for this with the Trumps, because they have destroyed careers, and people have run Republicans endorsed by Trump and done very poorly. Most Republicans are actually doing very poorly because they are attaching themselves to his agenda, which is not great. Not allowing exceptions for incest, not going well for a lot of places. Mm-hmm. And so what you have is, but they're spineless. So you have them with this duality that lives within them. You get to day 3, there's been a whisper network. And then all of a sudden there's a coup. And they're like, we're not having him. He's a convicted felon. So there's some kind of legal loophole they've figured out with their mediocre lawyers. And they do it right on the final day, right before the delegates. It's like, it's a go. There's some signal that goes up, some bat signal. And everyone just girds their loins. And they do it. They do the thing. And the thing is saving democracy. And I do believe their own party. Mm-hmm. Because they should just rename it at this point if it's going to continue. They save democracy. They come out looking like heroes. They then win basically all the midterms after that. They do sort of a sweep. Like, it's the best move for them possible. And we get a bad candidate possible president, but not a maniac who will destroy, at best, the next couple generations of Americans and their potential in our country. Like, I made this joke before Trump went into office that it would be fine as long as there were no wars or pandemics. It was pretty bad.
Yeah,
and in my lifetime, it's never been worse.
Mm-hmm.
I was like grounded by this daddy president. And so we need to, so I think actually it would not only save them from the tyranny of this man, but it would do what they're afraid of. If they turn on him, they're afraid they'll lose all the money, they'll lose all the donors, they'd get respect. And they would be able to actually have a base.
Mm-hmm.
It would radically alter our country.
And not to get technical here, because I don't know the answer. I don't know if you do, but the electors, who I would assume are like rabidly MAGA, wouldn't they have to be part of this scheme? So how would they be convinced to switch their votes from Trump to a replacement candidate?
Delegates are, there is, by the way, always drama at conventions with delegates, no matter what. When FDR, we were already at war, Joe Kennedy Jr., who is Kennedy's older brother who died in the war, he was one of the few delegates who voted against FDR when the entire Boston, Massachusetts Democrats, the entire party, had decided they were going to vote for him, and he went rogue, and he was one of like 1,000 to do it. And that's a wartime president. This happened with Reagan and Ford, in which there was a delegate who broke their leg but wouldn't go to the hospital because they were afraid that the person who took their place would cast a vote for Reagan instead of Ford. Delegates have always been like, the intensity is real. So I do think that if you sold this to them, you sold this magical thinking I'm doing, the convention of magical thinking, then it might be possible, because they are a pretty high-strung group to begin with. They take this job a little too seriously, shall we say. And I think that if you really work them, if you really manipulated them in a way that I'm not capable of, but I'm sure there are people who can figure out a very easy playbook, I would just be like, listen, here's the real deal. And I would try to like earnestly win them over, which never works. If you just empowered them in some way and made them feel like this would be their chance to save the party, I think it would work.
I always felt at some point, all it would take is a Mitch McConnell and whoever is the House Speaker and Lindsey Graham and all these other people to just do a press conference together and say, he is going to destroy democracy, and this we cannot support. And I thought after January 6th, that was the moment, and it appeared like it was going to be, but they just can't get off the pipe. So in this Hollywood script of what we're talking about, to me, it would have to be like other electors would need to be lined up before this moment so that the delegates who refuse to jump on board with your plan, you're out and Mary's coming in.
They also go by state. So I feel like you would strategically start with certain states, and then it would eventually.
Yeah, well, they've done that with the fake electors. They were pretty coordinated with that.
Yes. But in this, so here's the slight pushback with that, which is that, McConnell, they all did give those statements on the floor. They're like, we've done, it was Lindsey Graham who said, we've done a lot of good work together.
I'm out.
It's like, the way he phrased it, I wanted to.
It was pathetic. It was really pathetic.
dark thoughts about, what do they call him? It's like lady.
Oh, yeah. I do declare.
Yeah, I had some, so which is all to say that they're perfectly comfortable being disingenuous at all times. However, this is all about money when it comes down to it. We have always been all about capitalism from the very beginning. All the, what was slavery about? So Trump will bankrupt the party. Yes, they have this influx of money right now, but it has gone down. The coffers have been quite low. Why? Because they've been paying for his representation. He will bankrupt them. He will do to the, like, I think they know he will do to them what he has done to all businesses and people. He will leave them high and dry. But this is the moment. This is the moment. And I do think it's possible. I have to believe it's possible. I want to believe it's possible that, in George Washington's farewell address, he said that the problem with parties is that they become obsessed with political power and it paves the way to despotism. Mm-hmm. And I think that is shown itself to be true, but we've never been this close. Mm-hmm. We've never been this close. And I have to believe that the same way I see a really religious person and I hope to God that there's some genuine strand of it in them. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, what are we doing here? And I'm a really cynical person, but I have to believe there's some shred of decency in everyone and that they can have their moment. Mm. I know. Can you believe this coming out of my mouth?
No.
This is where we're at.
Yeah, well, you get a little older and you probably won't be saying that stuff. But so in order for this to happen, these insiders really need to believe that Trump's not winning. The insiders tend to know. They have their own polling. Like they have a good sense of where shit's going. So if they really do believe that they're not winning with him, then that scenario really starts to become more likely than not, because they're power hungry, like you say. They're money hungry, like you say. I can't imagine them just waltzing into November knowing like, well, it's over, but there's always 28. I just don't see that happening. So
two points. One is that I am not sure that we would be having this same conversation. Like, I know we wouldn't be having this exact same conversation, if the debate had gone slightly differently. Mm-hmm. And that it is not even July. Things might look very different in November. Things change quickly. Polling doesn't even really matter right now. Mm-hmm.
I just want to clarify. Are you talking about the Republicans now or Democrat? Or are we back to Biden?
I'm talking about the Republicans, right, because I'm going to assume that not too much is going to change.
Right. But if the Democrats... explain the part about the debate. If the debate had gone differently, in what sense?
So let's say the next debate, Trump is he's slow mm-hmm. and incoherent, and Biden wipes the floor with him, which is possible.
Oh, I see. You're saying if the other night Trump was a disaster for Trump.
Yes.
Right.
Like mm-hmm. Something else can come out about mm-hmm. Trump as the almost every single day. Mm-hmm. Well, he still hasn't been sentenced. That could change everything.
Yes. But there's 4 months left in this election. So much can happen in the next 4 months. The likelihood is so much will happen in the next 4 months. And so is it just really ludicrous to be obsessing about this debate the way at least the Democrats have been?
Yes, absolutely. But they're not calling the shots here. Mm-hmm. Trump is calling the shots because the media lets him call the shots. Mm-hmm. And that is why we're talking about this, because the media has latched on to this. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I think it's irresponsible, to put it mildly.
People must be reminded that whatever it is you think about Joe Biden, the other guy's a million times worse. And we need to keep that balance. We need to keep talking about that. And that's the thing. It's like the bar is so low for Donald Trump. It's like below ground. And like if Biden sneezes the wrong way, he's got to go. And to your point, the media has done that. They've normalized him and his lies. And it's like this strange place we're in where it's like, we don't talk about Trump. We just don't talk about Trump.
But even so let's say we're forced to look at it through this lens. Mm-hmm. And I think what's interesting is, so when they talk about presidential rankings, mm-hmm. they always say presidential historians and historians have said that this is the best and this is the worst, as if we just like sort of write in our vote and that's it. We just like take, right. We number them and that's it. There's criteria. There's, relationship with Congress, ability to communicate, all these things. So let's say that we're actually talking about these two men within that context, which I wish we were. Because again, 3 years, that's 3 years age difference. And Trump has had his days where he has seem like he has early onset dementia. Like this is a thing that happens mm-hmm. with men of that age in these situations, in these exhausting schedules. So I think about it this way. If Trump, let's just look at who's actually in charge, because of course the president, the job has gotten too big. Mm-hmm. And it is, a lot of things are outsourced. So I then think of the president as a manager. And I wish we were looking at the president. Okay, Biden not doing well, fine. Let's look at him as a manager. Let's compare him as a manager to Trump. So who will he put in charge, and who has he put in charge is the answer to that question, which is that Trump had the highest turnover of any president in recent history. Mm-hmm. People stayed in positions, sometimes a matter of weeks, but they almost always, and then, the really spineless ones left like on January 6th. They're like, oh my God, days before the next inauguration, I can no longer stomach this mm-hmm. man.
I found my integrity.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. But I think, because historians like myself are definitely going to give them a pass on that one. Mm-hmm. So you have this, and then he puts, Jared Kushner in charge of COVID. That went well. So you can look at all the ways that it was, a shit show. And then you look at Biden. People have stayed in those positions longer than, again, in recent history. It is incredible that Blinken is still in his job. It is incredible that Jared Sullivan is still in his job. These are not jobs that are easy. People have absolutely no time with their families. Mm-hmm. It's a thankless job, to say the least. It's fun. It has all the trappings. You go to state dinners, all of these things, but it's pretty bad. And they could just go into the private sector or take a beat. Biden is surrounded by competent people who have worked in government, and often for him throughout their entire career. So they were babies. I went to Obama's Democracy Forum in Chicago last fall. And what was amazing to me is they kept talking, Michelle and Barack kept talking about in their different speeches about, that person, they were like a 22-year-old college graduate. We met them, and now they've got a seat on the Security Council, and, so you have these people who can speak Biden. Mm-hmm. Trump, no one speaks Trump because he's erratic and esoteric and mercurial and other good words. And then you have Biden, who is knowable, who is a avuncular, grandfatherly figure, how to describe it how you will, but they feel a sense of alliance to his general goal and being. And I think that's really important.
The genius of Donald Trump, though, is that he goes onto that debate stage and he turns that turnover into a plus. Turns to Joe Biden and says, you never fired anybody. And the people at home are like, that's right, because he's such a great businessman. He knows when to fire. And it's just this circle of bullshit that works. And that's Trump's evil genius, that these facts shouldn't matter, that Trump has the highest turnover in history, that 40 out of 44 former cabinet members and aides refuse to endorse him, that his own vice president refuses to endorse him. Nobody cares because he has this magic power to go on a stage and twist that shit into gold. It's like everything in this country has been turned so inside out and upside down that's the way it works now,
Well, yeah, but that's the whole point. They want to be bullies. It's really interesting. Whenever I post anything or I get, emails because I've written an op-ed or whatever it is, there are pretty thoughtful responses from people who agree with me, detailed responses. And then the people who don't are just like, F you, or, something like that.
And usually they have love Jesus in their bio.
They do. That's not a joke. Or they have the place that they got their, divinity degree from.
Or English degree.
But divinity degree really drives me crazy because they've just called me all sorts of words. But actually, if they do that, I usually forward it to the divinity school. And I use the language. I say I think this person could use some grace. But here's what I do think would, again, in this magical thinking, we get outraged because he says things that we know aren't okay for us, about women, about people of color, about, just a complete lack of empathy. Bullying is the point. They respond to that. However, Donald Trump does not want to go and tailgate with the people who support him.
Of course not.
He does not want to hang out with them. He doesn't want to go to their homes. He doesn't want to eat their food. And I, in my, again, like real fantasy here, have wanted the leak to not be about grabbing a woman, because like we know that. We really know that. How much more evidence do we need there? I have wanted him, just anything about him having a real, honest line about his followers and what he thinks of them.
You just gave me a great idea for sentencing. The worst possible sentence for Donald Trump would be 6 months of house arrest in the home of like an Oklahoma MAGA family.
Oh my God.
How horrible.
It's like a Get Out situation.
Yes, exactly. But wouldn't that be the worst? We don't want him locked up in his own home. That's not a problem for him.
No, that's a great prison. He's the architect of prison.
Make those two parties live together and see how they get along after 6 months.
Now we're just talking crazy, but I like it.
Crazy's the best. All right, this conversation went by so fast. I got two things I need to ask you really quick. One is about the Supreme Court and its decision on immunity. So I need to know, not just specifically for Trump, because it's obviously impactful for him, but what does that ruling mean for the institution of the presidency going forward? The second thing is he's going to be sentenced. How important to America, to the rule of law, to democracy, and to the presidency going forward is it that he gets some kind of prison time?
I think accountability is really important. When Ford pardoned Nixon, Pew Research Center was in the middle of a poll. And it was so interesting because they were done with the findings and they were just sort of like collating everything. And they knew what people had responded, which was that they felt like he needed to be held accountable and that it was really important. And he wasn't held accountable. And then Ford's, his numbers plummeted and he lost the next election. And there were other things that played a role as well. But that was pretty significant. And also, Nixon was viewed quite coldly for firing his cabinet and all sorts of things. So it used to be a bad thing for Republicans to have such high turnover. But again, Trump has his own standard for some reason. When it comes to presidential immunity, this is something that I am very nervous about because we've never been in this situation because it's never happened before. This is not something that will like plague presidents from now on. They don't do the things that he's doing. And so I think it will be very bad for the presidency itself and the institution, which has suffered since Nixon and has really done poorly since Trump. I think that cynicism is out of control and it will be devastating in general to the office.
My last question, you had told me you're writing a book. If you want to talk about it.
So yes, I'm writing a book. Allegedly, it's going to be done soon on young JFK because I think we treat his presidency like a flyover state. And actually, this began because of Trump. I always knew I'd write a Kennedy book, but I thought it would be further in the future. And then I started to think about how they had really similar early starts in life, but then they completely differed, like around 15 or 16, and how much that mattered. And I think Kennedy is dismissed often as a sort of good-looking, rich guy. And he had a Purple Heart, and he had served in Congress for over 10 years. And I think that's an important thing to be reminded of.
Certainly is. Well, good luck writing that.
Good-looking.
We're back to Gavin Newsom again, aren't we? Newsom does have Kennedy-esque hair, doesn't he? In a way.
He does. Yeah.
Thanks for coming on. Do come back again sometime in the next couple months, and we'll talk about the craziness that's going on then.
Yes. Thank you.
All righty. Take care. This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Maddie Rosenberg and co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander, and our logo was designed by Cricket Langell. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.